Ash, wielding her sword with one hand, took the lead and entered the room. After surveying the surroundings to confirm there was no danger, she allowed Tilly and everyone else to step inside. As torches were hung on the walls, a spacious hall unfolded before them. Despite its size, it appeared empty and bare, with only a few tables and chairs. The scattered magic stones they had been searching for were nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Tilly seemed to notice something. Following her gaze, Ash saw Tilly reach out and tear away the green moss, revealing a gem partially embedded in the stone wall. Tilly attempted to pull it out, but the gem didn't budge. While Tilly was deep in thought, she placed her hand on the prism and closed her eyes. Suddenly, a beam of light flashed at the center of the prism. But soon, a rumbling sound reverberated from behind the wall, as if some mechanism had been triggered. Before long, the commotion spread throughout the entire hall. The sailors stood up in panic, and Ashen quickly picked up Tilly and retreated. Suddenly, an iron chain dropped down, followed by the opening of a door. Dozens of small holes appeared on the walls, each containing a stone emitting a pure white glow. Even Thunder was stunned. These stones on the walls looked like the snow crystals produced in the Eternal Winter Kingdom, but twice as bright. A fist-sized piece could be sold for hundreds of gold royals. They soon entered a new room, where wooden tables, chairs, bookshelves, and cabinets remained intact. The surfaces were covered in thick dust, and remnants of cobwebs could still be seen. Tilly picked up a book spread open on the table, gently brushing off the dust, and started flipping through the pages. The writings were in a language she had never seen before. At the other end of the room, they noticed a peculiar-looking object. At first glance, it resembled a thick, sturdy metal tube, somewhat like a telescope used for navigation. Thunder leaned in and looked through the lens for a while, but he couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. Ash noticed a copper plate on the wall, with a small hole beneath it, seemingly intended for inserting a key. Gripping the handle, Ash pulled with all her might, causing the entire copper plate to come loose from the wall. A massive magic stone was wedged in the groove behind the copper plate. Unlike the previous two stones, it appeared much larger in size and had a purplish hue. Tilly decided to activate it with her magic. After a long time, beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Tilly sensed the magic stone continuously absorbing magic, indicating the presence of a complex mechanism behind it. Just as Tilly's magic was nearly depleted, the entire room began to shake. The tremendous amount of dust caused Thunder to cough a few times. He opened his eyes, which had been pressed against the end of the metal tube. Then, he was left speechless, utterly shocked by the sight before him. At the other end emerged a vast expanse of land, with the cliffs that seemed bottomless. In the center of the cliff stood an immensely colossal stone archway. The depths within the archway were profound and dark, resembling a colossal maw ready to devour anyone who dared enter. A few days later, Maisie brought a letter. Roland spread out the paper and handed Maisie a piece of beef jerky. She opened her mouth and swiftly devoured the jerky, then obediently nestled her head into the feathers by the table. The letter began with, "Dear brother, or rather, Prince Roland Wimbledon. I have received your letter, and I wholeheartedly agree with your perspective," it read. "Though I am unsure why you have suddenly changed your ways and abandoned your previous frivolous lifestyle to help the witches. But since you have taken this path, the church has become our common enemy." Tilly mentioned in the letter that she had become a witch herself, leading her own team of witches. Roland have gained the approval of Ashes and Maisie. Tilly expressed her interest in the Roland's ability evolution theory and the steam engine. She agreed to the formation of an alliance and agreed to provide auxiliary abilities witches to assist him. She provided Roland a list of some of the witch's abilities, and through Maisie, she informed him that they could set off next month. However, due to safety concerns, the group should not exceed 5 people at once, and protection should be arranged. Tilly hoped that Roland would treat the witches of Slumbering Isle as fairly as he treated the witches in his own territory. Finally, she expressed her desire to end the church's oppression and build a new order, a kingdom where not only witches but anyone would be free from unjust persecution. Roland set aside the letter, feeling an indescribable sense of joy. He smiled and tucked away the paper, then pulled out another piece of beef jerky and offered it to Maisie. She opened her mouth, snatched the jerky, and swallowed it in a couple of bites before obediently resting her head on the table, burying it in the feathers. He had never expected Tilly to accept his invitation. The surprises brought by her response far exceeded his expectations. Her openness and enthusiasm made him feel like he had found an extraordinary ally. With her on his side, he no longer had to fight the church alone. As for the secure transportation route, he had already considered it thoroughly. The more he thought about it, the more excited Roland became. However, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden explosion from the rear. Startled, he woke up from his daydream. Thinking it might be an enemy attack, he hurriedly opened the window to investigate the direction. It was the chemical laboratory. Roland rushed to the laboratory near the Crimson Water River, but the damage wasn't as severe as he had imagined. When he arrived, he saw Kyle Sichi lying on the ground with traces of blood leading from the accident site to the front door. His face was blurred, a mixture of blood and pus resulting from the corrosive acid that had splashed during the explosion. Several fingers were missing from his hand, and white bones could be seen through the flesh. The apprentices had already administered emergency treatment, indicating that they had encountered similar incidents while in Crimson Water City. They had successfully evacuated the injured, applied tourniquets, and sought help. Roland instructed his guards to secure the entrance and wait for Nanawa's arrival. He then entered the side room with Carter to search for the alchemist's fingers. Even if the young girl managed to heal his injuries, he wouldn't be able to conduct chemical experiments without his fingers. It would be a significant loss for the border town. Upon entering the room, an unpleasant odor filled the air, and Roland recognized it as the smell of nitrogen dioxide. The glass bottles on the lab table were shattered, and acid flowed down the tabletop, gathering into puddles on the floor. Something else caught Roland's attention in the storage cabinet above the lab table. He removed the peculiar-shaped bottle and realized it was a bottle of hard liquor sold in the market. Surprisingly, a considerable portion of the liquor had been consumed, with only a little left in the bottle. One of the guards reported Nanawa's arrival, and Roland left Carter to continue searching for the severed finger among the shards of glass. He returned to the front door of the laboratory. For Nanawa, this level of treatment had become routine. Compared to the girl who used to be scared of blood and would faint at the sight of a horrifying wound, she had grown a lot both in terms of her abilities and courage. Nanawa smiled proudly and said, "I can now heal these minor injuries directly." Nanawa placed her hands above the alchemist's chest, closed her eyes, and immediately there was a change in Kyle's injuries. His face healed rapidly, returning to its original state in no time. Surprisingly, even the severed fingers began to grow outward, although at a much slower pace. First, the bones extended, followed by the flesh and finally the nails and skin. It took about 15 minutes for his fingers to fully regenerate. At that moment, the guard reported that only 3 fingers had been found, and one of the severed fingers may have been completely destroyed in the explosion. "When did you learn to do this?" Roland asked in astonishment. Nanawa smiled and replied, "About a week ago, she had been training with chickens. She found that it didn't require severed limbs to grow back. As long as she infused enough magic power, it could gradually regenerate." Nanawa recalled what Roland said, that every part of the human body is composed of cells, so if there is a loss of cells at the severed area, magical power should be able to compensate for it. So she thought, why not try to repair the entire limb? And that's what she attempted. Her magical power is still too limited, so if it were a hand or a lower leg, she would be unable to accomplish it. Kyle slowly opened his eyes, as if forgetting what he had just experienced. Suddenly, he jumped up with excitement and exclaimed, "I've done it! Mercury fulminate!" It turned out that the missing reactant was alcohol. Prior to this, he had tested dozens of different materials without any progress. Frustrated, he went out and bought some liquor. Then it dawned on him that he had learned in basic chemistry that alcohol was an organic solvent and a necessary ingredient for certain reactions. So he distilled and purified the hard liquor, and after 6 attempts, he finally succeeded. As he filtered out the precipitate in the test tube, there was a sudden explosion. Although Roland was happy, he still wished that Kyle would prioritize his safety. He pointed at Manhwa and said, if it weren't for Manhwa witch abilities to heal him, Cammo might have been. Before Roland could finish his sentence, Kyle interjected, good heavens! Are you saying this witch can cure injuries caused by alchemy, or rather, chemical experiments? Ha ha ha! Your Highness, this is truly marvelous. With her around, I no longer have to worry about danger. I can test everything now. Unexpectedly, Kyle's reaction was quite different from what Roland had anticipated. However, with this new development, the percussion cap for the fixed bullets finally showed promise. Back in his office, Roland immediately began working on the designs for the new machinery. During the days when the First Army and the witches went to the capital, he wasn't idle at all. On the contrary, Roland felt busier than ever before. The border town needed to construct residential buildings and dormitories capable of housing tens of thousands of people within 6 months. Moreover, there was an outbreak at Changji stronghold, and Petrov earnestly requested Roland's assistance. The newly designed smelting furnace was also successfully built with a sturdy cast iron exterior, clay bricks as the inner layer, and Soroya's earth coating, boasting excellent heat resistance. This furnace could produce around 50 tons of molten steel at a time. Returning to his office, Roland retrieved the parchment paper enclosed with the 5th princess's letters from the drawer and spread it out on the desk. Finally, he had reached the long-awaited moment, the selection of visiting witches. Under normal circumstances, Roland would have been yawning incessantly, but today he was full of enthusiasm and had no trace of drowsiness. He then opened one of the parchment papers and began writing his reply. He apologized for the delayed response and expressed his excitement and satisfaction with Tilly's decision. He acknowledged that his achievements today were made possible with the help of the witches, and he hoped to promote this ideology throughout the entire western region and the entire kingdom. To accomplish this, he must destroy the entire church and rescue the people from ignorance and superstition. It would be a long process, requiring more of Tilly's assistance. As for the details, he wished to discuss them in person with Tilly in the future. Finally, he wrote down the names of the 5 selected witches. The terrain shaper, Lien, state preserver, Candle, the brewmaster, Evelyn, the beast tamer, Honey, and the true sightseer, Sylvie. The First Army Expeditionary Force and the witches had finally returned back to the border town. Nightingale had also returned. Roland wanted her to rest and recover properly since she had been exhausted for the past month. After a moment of silence, Roland thought that Nightingale couldn't let go of her feelings towards the witch who had opposed them. Nightingale said that she didn't want to kill her, but when she saw her aiming for Wendy, she understood that nothing could stop her except death. Roland paused for a moment and said, "Do you remember what you said to me when we returned from defeating Timothy's militia?" Nightingale thought for a moment and replied, "It's not your fault, right?" Roland reassured her that witch was raised by the church since childhood, and they were different. "You saved Wendy and the others," he added. Nightingale smiled, knowing that Roland was comforting her. She didn't feel grief for the enemy. She had come to terms with it during their time on the ship. Roland was relieved that Nightingale didn't feel lost or confused. Suddenly, Nightingale turned around and asked Roland a question that made his face turn red. "What have you been doing with Anna these days?" Nightingale's voice grew softer, but her eyes remained fixed on the prince. "You know what I mean." Roland coughed a couple of times, feeling embarrassed. He had been busy every day with resettling the refugees, leaving little opportunity for private moments with Anna. Nightingale's eyes instantly brightened, knowing that Roland wasn't lying. Before Roland could finish his sentence, Nightingale disappeared abruptly. Then he felt a soft pair of lips on his own, a fleeting touch that lasted only a moment.
What? Oh my God!
After a good while, he realized what had just happened. Nightingale had suddenly vanished, and he heard her whisper in his ear, "I don't want to change anything, and I don't intend to come between you and Anna." I just want to stay by your side, that's all. Please forgive me for not showing myself, because I don't know how to face you. Your Highness, you don't dislike me, do you? Roland knew it was impossible for him to dislike Nightingale. The obstacles in his heart came from over 20 years of ingrained beliefs. His feelings for Nightingale went beyond mere fondness, and he couldn't deceive himself about that. In that case, she whispered softly, let's not say anything. It's not your fault, and I just did what I wanted to do. After dinner, Anna walked into the kitchen carrying a big bag of bird's kiss mushrooms. Just then, Nightingale suddenly darted out from the wall. Hey, what are you up to? She asked. Anna explained that she wanted to use the mushrooms to make a late-night snack for His Highness. Roland had been working late into the night these days and would often get hungry. Nightingale looked at Anna and asked if she could teach her how to make it. Sure, Anna smiled and began explaining the differences between bird's kiss mushrooms and ordinary mushrooms. She shared that her mother would always gather some for her birthday and cook a dish with them. Anna prepared the sauce and carefully roasted the mushrooms over the fire. Nightingale asked if Roland had been working late recently. Anna explained that he had been working on resettling refugees and drawing blueprints for new machinery, often not sleeping until past midnight. You've missed His Highness a lot, haven't you? Anna asked. Nightingale's hand trembled slightly, causing a mushroom to fall into the butter. Well, I guess so, she stuttered. Not just you, but Lightning, Lily, Echo, and Wendy also miss His Highness. They say there's not even a place to take a bath there, and they've been wanting to come back for a while. Anna suddenly noticed a strange expression on Nightingale's face. What's wrong? She asked. Nightingale scratched her head and admitted that she did miss him quite a bit. While chatting, Nightingale accidentally burnt a mushroom, and they made a few more attempts. After a while, Anna suggested they should go together and bring the dishes to Roland. However, Nightingale insisted that Anna should go alone and bring the mushroom to Roland. Anna arrived at Roland's office and told Roland that Nightingale said she don't know what expression to have when she see Roland now. Anna initially thought that Nightingale felt embarrassed to face Roland because she had eaten some while cooking. But then she realized that she had also eaten some herself. Roland smiled, looked at the mushroom skewers, picked one up, and reminisced about the evening. He took a bite and his clothes exploded, transforming him into a character from the Food War, Shokyuji no Soma. The taste started with the sweetness of honey, followed by the juicy essence of the mushrooms, reminding him of MSG. He took another skewer, but this one seemed a bit too salty. Looking at the plate of mushrooms, Roland feels the mushroom looked clumsy yet adorable. In his past life as a mechanical dog, he was focused on studying and learning, rarely interacting with any female. Even after graduating and finding a job at a design institute, the situation didn't change much, and he didn't understand how to respond to their affections. Roland lets out a soft sigh. There is still a long way to go before completely overthrowing the church, and he can take his time to consider what to do next. For now, he decides to concentrate on completing the tasks at hand. The next morning, when Roland stepped onto the wooden platform set up in the square, the surroundings were already crowded with people. The border town has undergone a tremendous transformation from its previous desolate and impoverished appearance. The sparse old houses in the town have all been demolished and replaced by construction sites and uniform brick buildings. Standing on the wooden platform, Roland's voice was amplified by echo, making it clear to everyone. He began his speech. In the past 6 months, we have overcome the demonic beasts, defeated the Duke, and transformed the town. Many people have contributed a lot to this transformation, including a few outstanding individuals who were once ordinary people, just like all of you. Roland looked around and continued loudly, but now, they will receive generous rewards. These include a medal handcrafted by me, 100 gold dragons, and 5 acres of land. This ceremony will be held once a year, regardless of birth or wealth. As long as you achieve outstanding merits, you will receive this highest honor. As Roland's words fell, the crowd erupted with tremendous fever, shouting, "Long live His Highness!" After the crowd quieted down, the heroes began to step onto the wooden platform. The first person to approach the stage was Axe, who was previously just an ordinary hunter. Throughout the wars that have erupted in the border town, he always charged at the front line. Axe appeared excited yet nervous. Roland personally placed the medal on him, and Axe's voice trembled slightly as he tried to restrain his emotions. The second person was Kyle Sichi, an alchemist from the alchemy workshop in the central part of the kingdom. Kyle made significant contributions to the development and improvement of weapons. Roland also said that the laboratory is currently recruiting apprentice alchemists. Those who pass the selection will receive generous rewards and have the opportunity to become masters like Kyle. Kyle himself appeared impatient, and he took the medal with an irritated tone, saying, "Is this why you called me here? What a waste of time. I'd rather conduct a few more experiments." Roland patted his shoulder and said, "Once the laboratory expands twice its size, I plan to write intermediate chemistry and entrust it to you for teaching." Kyle's attitude instantly changed, and he kept bowing in gratitude. Next, before Roland could even introduce her, the square erupted with thunderous cheers. "Miss Manhwa! Miss Manhwa is here! Miss Manhwa, thank you for curing my husband," someone exclaimed, addressing her as the angel. "Miss Manhwa, she's looking at me." "No, she's looking at me." In the midst of the celebration, two individuals in the crowd playfully argued about catching Nanawa's attention. Nanawa couldn't help but cover her mouth, her eyes becoming moist. Roland believed that other witches present shared the same feelings as her. They had finally shed the oppressive label of evil imposed upon them by the church and could now walk under the sun as ordinary people. Roland smiled and gently patted her head, saying, "No need to be afraid, just respond to everyone's enthusiasm. Remember, you are now a representative of the Witch Union." She sniffed and wiped away the tears that were about to fall, bowing gracefully and saying, "Thank you, everyone." The ceremony lasted until noon, and Roland, who played the roles of presenter, commentator, and host, was exhausted by the end. Fortunately, the ceremony concluded successfully with the tolling of the noon bell and the sound of cannon salutes. Sweating profusely, Roland returned to the castle, and as he reached the third floor, he saw Anna standing by the office door with a smile on her face. She blinked her beautiful azure eyes and led Roland into a room. Roland pushed open the door in a daze and stood frozen in place. In front of him stood 12 witches, arranged neatly in 2 rows. At the forefront were Scroll and Wendy. Upon seeing the prince, everyone lifted the corners of their dresses, bent their knees, and bowed in reverence. "Thank you, Prince Roland," they all said in unison.
Nice.